Welcome to the third edition of Planet Politics, an Australian View. There is no such thing as a stupid American, Oscar Wilde once remarked. Indeed, in America, there is no opening for a fool, added the 19th century Irish poet, playwright and wit. Wilde's observations come to mind at the end of the first month of Donald Trump's second four-year term as US President. To call it a whirlwind would be akin to likening Mount Everest to a hill. There's been nothing like it. Trump's mixture of payback and abolishing 9 decades of federal involvement in areas like education and corporate regulation have flummoxed observers and participants alike. He has degraded US government services, triggered mass US Justice Department resignations, conducted a vendetta against the FBI and the CIA, defenestrated US aid, politicised government payments, and declared his intention to take over the Gaza Strip, Greenland, Canada, and reacquire the Panama Canal. He has pardoned rioting insurrectionists, ordered a mass roundup of illegal immigrants, and construction of a giant internment camp at the US base at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. Trump has started, retreated from, then restarted a trade war with Canada and Mexico, is engaged in another trade war with China, and is threatening a similar tariff tirade with the European Union. He's also threatening to impose 25% extra tariffs on steel and aluminum imports into the US and implement a broad tit-for-tat tariff regime. Oh, and in a phone call with Vladimir Putin, Trump just about conceded Russia's demand for Ukraine to lose about 1/5 of its territory and be refused NATO membership. And this was before the start of so-called peace talks aimed at ending the 3-year-old war. The 47th President's Disruption Express hit overdrive as he declared the US would take over the Israeli-levelled Gaza Strip. He encouraged, or is that coerced, Egypt and Jordan to house Gaza's 2.2 million Palestinian residents, and said the US would rebuild Gaza's shattered infrastructure and convert it into a Riviera. Nick Bryant, a former BBC correspondent in the US, wrote in the Sydney Morning Herald that Trump's bloody-minded approach reminded him of the chant of fans of Britain's most unfashionable soccer club, Millwall FC. Nobody likes us, we don't care. International opprobrium seems only to embolden him. It also offers proof to MAGA supporters, if any were still needed, that he is prepared to say the unsayable, which has always been his selling point. Trump 2.0 is Trump unleashed, Bryant wrote. At a domestic level, Trump presents like a character from the Bible's Book of Romans. Its vengeance is mine vow matches Trump's I am your retribution election campaign promise. But is Trump stupid? Well, a CBS poll released on February 9 found 53% of US voters liked his presidential job performance so far. This is Trump's best approval rating ever. Respondents described the 78-year-old Trump as effective, focused, tough, competent and energetic, and said he's delivering on 2024 election campaign promises. Dean Phillips, a former Democratic congressman from Minnesota and a one-time presidential hopeful, last week considered that Trump is quite popular. The Democrats are being steamrolled and must start listening to people, Phillips said. And America's premier podcaster, Joe Rogan, says Democrats are, quote, saying stupid shit. This begs another question. Donald Trump is a convicted felon who was facing 3 other court cases for various alleged offences at the time of last year's presidential election. He has been recorded boasting about grabbing women's private parts, has been found by a New York court to have committed sexual abuse, is a serial, documented non-payer of bills, incited a riot at the US Capitol after losing the 2020 presidential election, and then went on to win the 2024 poll. So who's stupid? Well, it's complicated, as long-running US TV soap star Denise Richards once put it. And opinions can surprise. For example, the Wall Street Journal, which is owned by Rupert Murdoch, one of Trump's most powerful backers, labels his tariff contretemps as the dumbest trade war in history. What the Musk is happening? Nobel Prize winner economist and one-time New York Times columnist Paul Krugman asks this question in a recent Substack file. Answering his own question, Krugman wrote that Trump's America is gripped by a sort of digital coup. Soon after, he gazumped his own analysis. What's happening in America right now is an attempted auto golpe, Krugman wrote. This is where an elected leader uses his position to seize total control, eliminating legal and constitutional restraints to his power. However, the US courts are circling. A flurry of US federal court judgments in recent days ordered the release of Congress-authorized funds that had been frozen by the Trump-appointed Tesla boss Elon Musk and his young tech bros at the so-called Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. Trump's court's contretemps turned ominous on February 10, when US District Court Judge John McConnell Jr. found Trump's administration was defying court orders by continuing the DOGE freeze on some federal funds. This was likely unconstitutional and has caused and continues to cause irreparable harm to a vast portion of this country, McConnell said. Then on February 14, 7 federal prosecutors resigned rather than sign on to a US Justice Department instruction to withdraw charges against New York Mayor Eric Adams. Krugman likens Trump's actions to those of strong-armed Latin American leaders, and the story of elected president turned authoritarian Argentina's Juan Perón comes to mind. Perón was president of Argentina from 1946 until 1955 and won 3 elections, but he arrested political opponents and muzzled Argentine newspapers until he was ousted in a coup. Following 18 years of exile, mainly in Spain, Perón was once again president from 1973 until his death in 1974. A more recent example is Hungary's Viktor Orbán. Hailing from Hungary's Fidesz, or Youth Party, Orbán was an example of Hungary's young people rejecting the communist straitjacket and embracing pluralism in the 1980s. 30 years later, the 3 times elected Prime Minister declared, "We do not want our own colour, traditions and national culture to be mixed with those of others. We do not want to be a diverse country." 2 years later, the Hungarian Parliament granted Prime Minister Orbán the power to rule by decree, suspend by-elections and introduce prison sentences for spreading so-called fake news. As Krugman's phrasing suggests, the ringleader in Trump's auto golpe is Elon Musk, the world's richest man with his strange Lovian ways. Remember the Roman salute? Support for far-right politicians in Germany and the UK, and Musk urging Germans to stop dwelling on their past. Musk's remit is to make fiscal room for Trump's promised $4.5 trillion in tax cuts. Doge-generated spending cuts, combined with lower interest rates, corporate deregulation, and the promised tax cuts, bodes well for the broader American economy. That is, according to a scenario gaining loud backers in US finance markets. Well, we'll see. Meanwhile, bookshelves groan under the weight of the growing list of titles about Donald Trump. Many contain sensational revelations that, like others in the past, are just shrugged off. So what's behind the Trump Mark II phenomenon? Many blame social media and iPhones for undermining memory and focus, and allowing Trump to dismiss the casualties, infamies, and collateral damage of his past and win his second presidential election. Others point to America's cultural Barnum and Bailey genes. They say voters are drawn to Trump because they feel good around him. He's fun. Another factor is the anti-woke wave, which Trump surfed to the shore of his 2024 election victory against Vice President Kamala Harris. Then there's one-time Democrat campaign strategist James Carville, who called the economy stupid as the main factor in elections. In current terms, this relates to high prices for staples like groceries plus inflation, which Trump successfully blamed on the former Biden administration. Polls suggest the last factor is the most important. One revealing explanation of Trump's modus operandi, or his winning ways, is contained in the film The Apprentice. This traverses the history of ambitious, budding Manhattan realtor Donald Trump's links with New York lawyer Roy Cohn, who was also a prominent figure in America's post-war anti-communist witch hunt, plus Trump's strained family background. According to The Apprentice's director, Iranian Ali Abbasi, the film shows how Cohen mentored Trump and influenced to become the person we now know. After receiving an 8-minute standing ovation at last May's Cannes Film Festival, The Apprentice struggled to find American distribution, largely due to attempts by Trump's legal team to block its release. It finally hit American screens just a few weeks before the November 5 US presidential election. Tony Schwartz, who ghostwrote Trump's book, The Art of the Deal, argued in an opinion piece published in the New York Times that The Apprentice is less about how Trump rose to power, but more about the generational impact of his family trauma and dysfunction, and how this shaped Trump. Just 1 month after the start of his second 4-year White House iteration, Trump's impact is spreading around the world. We may not be Trumpians, but we're all reacting to Donald.